Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked? There we go. Your dial's set correctly to USA Prepares. We broadcast 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. through 11 a.m. Central Time. Jason engineers the broadcast at Genesis Communications Network. I'm Vincent Finelli. Rich Scheben's with us, and we won't be taking calls today. Rich Scheben has so many items on the blackboard that there won't be any room for calls today. Welcome, Rich Scheben.
Well, thank you, Vince, and I appreciate that. I just think that, as I've mentioned several times, this last few months is going to make or break America, and we're either going to get an agenda that's forced austerity. Basically, only certain people. We're basically going to have a caste system. We're going to have an aristocracy, serf system, no middle class, forced vaccines, forced lockdowns, continue the delegitimization of work. Political correctness will be our guide. Divide and conquer strategies and rationalizing and justifying hate to fear will be the new norm, all controlled by technology. And Vince, when we spoke, I can't remember, was it yesterday or the day? It was yesterday. It's really funny, class, how when Vince and I talk privately, Vince is like, "Oh, you got to mention that story on the air. We got to talk about that on the air." Folks, you have no idea how much details and information that I have to give to the American people to wake them up. And I shortcut everything, every story, every article, every detail but I try and keep it in context of the message. Now, Vince, you wanted me to talk actually about a story about cars, actually specifically my pickup truck. And you wanted me to mention this. Yes, yeah, America.
Yeah, since
Vince Finelli asked me to talk about vehicles.
Since you mentioned cars, you know, Amit Singh sent me emails, and one of them said, "Since you mentioned cars."
Yeah. You know what? So if you do publish a book, Vince, I think that would be a great title. Since you mentioned,
I'm going to
cars.
write it down.
I don't think you need to. Well, anyway, Vince asked me to mention this story, and I'll try to be as quick as possible. Regarding my pickup truck, it's got about 100,000 miles on it, and I take it into the dealership to get oil changes, and occasionally I need new things like a tune-up or this part or that part. You know, they plug everything into the computers this day, even though the newest vehicle I own is a 2011. Basically, for all intents and purposes, it's a 10-year-old vehicle. Because vehicles, as you know, are made the year before. It says, it identifies as, if you will. So anyway, long story short, they asked me if I wanted a new tire pressure sensor because the sensor went out. And I said, well, you know, back in the 60s and 70s when we were driving around, I wasn't driving in the 60s, I was just a kid, but, you know, we used to do things like actually check the tire pressure, you know, whether we used a tire gauge or we went to air was free pretty much everywhere back in those days. Heck, I remember my dad would just walk up to the tire and kick the tire. So we just did things a certain way. And I asked just out of curiosity, what was the tire pressure sensor cost? And it was $150 for labor and materials. And I just said, why do I need it? with all these computers and all this fancy stuff, why can't I just check things the old-fashioned way? Why can't I check the oil the old-fashioned way? Why can't I, check my fluids the old-fashioned way? And, we've gotten too fancy in technology, and that's given us too much. You've heard me talk about unitive measures of despair, things that are going in the wrong direction, like drugs and suicides, obesity, follower behaviors, people who are addicted to technology and have no balance with nature, how easy people are being sold out to buy narratives and avoid facts and truth because of political correctness or other reasons. We are literally lying down and accepting totalitarianism, tyrannical policies. We are accepting coups on a duly elected president. And at the same time, the antidepressant, depressant medication, the psychotropic drugs are shooting through the moon. And we're seeing, as the powers that be recruit more followers into this lifestyle, we're seeing more of the consequences of inaction towards political correctness occur, and it's been getting worse and worse and worse every year. So we're not seeing justice for the people because of this. And the people have to pay when we can't fix it. It's called, and turns into forced obsolescence. We have to take it back to the dealership. We have to get it fixed. It costs more money. And we're losing skill sets along the line, along that way. It's kind of analogous to having a big house. So many people think, I got to have a big house so I can prove and show off my success. Well, when you are basically talked into buying a certain lifestyle, you're falling into this cookie-cutter follower, politically correct subdivision mentality where you no longer think outside the box. Just like when you have the big house, you also have bigger taxes, bigger insurance, bigger maintenance, and all other things go along with that. Increased covenants, increased homeowners associations, and you have certain things that you're not allowed to do. Maybe in that particular neighborhood you can't cut down your own trees that you paid for. Maybe you can't have chickens, or especially roosters. Maybe you can't have fire pits to do entertainment and cook around the fire pit like I do all the time. Maybe you have to paint your house certain colors or can't have certain colors. You really have to ask about this lifestyle of fancy / technology / showing off your success and / because we're getting to the point where there's very little legitimacy in everything, including our economy. I mean, the powers that be we're literally in the process of the global economy because of this COVID-19, which is 1% about the pandemic or the plandemic, and 99% about the agenda, which we've talked about in great detail and specificity on the show. So this COVID-19 global economy and velocity of money is purposely being shut down. So this is why we talk a lot about inflation, deflation, stagflation, and I've given many, many hour-long lectures on this. We have an inflation of food and certain items of necessity for the little people, but we're still on paper in the deflationary, stagflationary economy. Now, when all this printed money that they're giving away starts chasing goods, then duck, because inflation is going to be flying around our heads. And unfortunately, we're in this situation, and we talk to the bottom 93% of income earners, okay? It's just like the examples that we give all the time with articles. The airlines are taking bailouts, so what do? The executives fire staff, and we go back to this elite aristocracy, fascist caste system. So we have more bankruptcies, more delinquencies, and more defaults increasing, unfortunately. And as long as we don't not just think outside the box, not just speak outside the box, but we have to live outside the box, because we are literally allowing hypocrisy, double standards, and brainwashing, and these these divide and conquer strategies are literally, and we have talked about this, we have connected the dots. We are literally giving free lunch to the elite, and the wealth redistribution for asset ownership, for tax loopholes, it doesn't matter. It's illegitimately going to the top 1%. And we're literally falling into this trap. And I as much as I hate to use cars or vehicles as an example to start this story, I just wanted to mention that we really need, now there is some good news about this COVID-19, Vince. I talked about this yesterday. There's one positive result. Millions and millions of people are moving to rural America, and they're trying to go back to basics, logic, skill sets, living off the land, natural resources, thinking the way our ancestors, our pioneers, our homesteaders did it. And that's really good news because obviously in these blue Democrat cities, nobody wants to be there for obvious reasons. Vince?
Since you mentioned cars, I just wanted to add a little bit more about how bad this situation is with these tire pressure sensors. So, as Rich said, when we were younger, we would take a tire pressure gauge and we'd walk around the vehicle and we would put this gauge on each tire. We'd remove the valve cap on the tire valve stem, and we'd push this gauge on, and it would pencil type gauge, and it'd push out this rod, and it was marked with numbers like 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 22, 35, 34, 36, and so forth. And you would read the pressure, and you would either increase or decrease the pressure accordingly in the tire. Well, now we have these automatic sensors that are embedded inside the tire wheel assembly. Now, really what they are, think of it like a couple, in terms of size, maybe 4 dominoes put together, 2 on one end and 2 on another, and then the tire valve stem in the middle. And this thing is put inside the tire wheel assembly. It's attached to the wheel. And most of the wheels are aluminum, and the valve stem from this tire pressure sensor is aluminum as well. And what happens when you go to get your new tires, a lot of times the technician uses that tire spoon. It's that long rod. It's kind of like a pry bar almost. And when they remove the tire from the wheel, as the wheel rotates on the tire machine, that spoon hits the tire pressure sender and breaks it. Now it's a $150 repair. And so each one of the wheels has a tire pressure sender or sensor. And they are programmed. They have a serial number, kind of like a MAC address or a unique ID. And they're programmed to your car so that when it'll tell you which wheel has low pressure. So they have to be programmed for the wheel that they're on. So the left front, the right front, the left rear, the right rear. They're all uniquely programmed. So you know which tire is low. Now, if you go to change your tires and the tire technician nicks this thing and breaks it, it's $150 typically on average for one of them. They've got 4 of them. That'd be $600 additional to the cost of the tires and the balancing and the labor. Then, I'll tell you a little bit more about this when we come back, and this is kind of annoying and expensive. We'll be right back with Rich Scheben. So we're talking about these tire sensors, and what happens is they're the actual valve stem where you apply air to inflate the tire is made with aluminum. And the valve, the Schrader valve that actually controls the pressure, that little button you push in the tire valve to let air in or out, that thing, that's also made out of aluminum. And what happens is they rust and they corrode and they lock in place. So when you go to buy a new tire, the tire guy wants to take that Schrader valve out of the valve stem. He goes to take it out and it breaks off. What breaks off? The entire valve stem, because it's real thin aluminum. So now you need a new tire pressure sensor or sender. That's $150, parts and labor, because the guy broke it off. Why did he break it off? Because in the normal course of changing a tire, you let the air out of the tire so you can dismount the tire. That's a normal thing. Well, they break off all the time, and you cannot fix them. They cannot be fixed. They're designed to break, and they're designed for you to buy a new one. Now, when you buy a new one, the guy who, or gal who, does the installation and teaches this new sensor or sender to work with your car has to have a tool, a computer tool, in order to program your car's computer to recognize that new sensor. Now, that tool costs $135, but it doesn't do all cars. It only does some cars. So you can get a less expensive one that'll do, let's say, General Motors. But if you want Ford, you get a different one. Or you spend a lot of money, hundreds of dollars, and get one that does most cars, but not all cars. So some manufacturers are proprietary. So what I'm saying is this tire pressure thing, while it seems to be a real, oh, what a great idea, I don't have to check my tires, is a nuisance. Absolute nuisance. And these silly things fail all the time. So people, our customers, or our son's customers, come in, they say, yeah, I've got this light on my dash, tire pressure's bad, but it's actually the sender. And so, is it worth $150 or $100 or $50 to fix that thing? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So, they break when you get your new tires installed. They break by themselves, and they break when you try to let air out of tires. It's something that is absolutely, positively not necessary. But the generally dumb public does not understand that for about $1 or $2 or $3 or $4, or if you really want a pretty good one, maybe $20 for a tire pressure gauge, you can do this yourself. But we don't know how to do this. It's too hard to walk around the car and look at the tires. Way too hard, right? It's kind of like, I got called into the dean's office when our daughter was going to school, because I had our daughter sign a contract with me that said that she would check the tires once a week before using the family car. And before she got in the vehicle, every single time, she would walk around the vehicle and look and visually inspect if any of the tires were flat before taking off. And while she was walking around the car, she would look at the, underneath there. Are there any animals under there? Is there any animal behind the car? Did somebody leave a shopping cart behind the truck that you couldn't see? Look in the vehicle, in the back seats. Anybody in there? Did anybody break in? That was required. That was a written contract with our daughter because she drove first, on the road. It was a written contract. And the dean at the university called me and said, what I'm doing is absolutely unfair. That's miserable, making her do that, and making her replace her own brakes and fan belts and check all the fluids and change her own oil and do all that stuff. That's, I guess, cruel and unusual punishment. And I said, you know what? I didn't get a manual when we got her. She came without an owner's manual, and I'm trying to figure this out by myself. And by the way, she's our daughter, not yours. And the insurance agent, I shared that with him. He wanted to see the contract. He thought it was so good, he put it in his filing cabinet because he thought every parent should do that. Every parent should teach their children how to change the tire. Okay, so before we go for that first drive, we're going to learn how to change the tire in case you have a flat. We're going to learn how to chock the wheels. We're going to learn how to make sure the vehicle's level. We're going to learn how to loosen the lug nuts. And if they're really tight, we're going to learn how to loosen a really tight lug nut by stepping on the tire wrench, the lug nut wrench. Yeah. So there's a lot of things wrong with America, and that's just one little nit, that we're too stupid to check our own tires. Can you imagine that? So we're going to rely on some computer to do it for us. We'll be right back with Rich Scheben. And he's in Montana, and he lives off-grid. So Rich brought up a really good point. Why are we all so broke? Well, I looked up the price of a 2010 Ford Mustang, a common car tire pressure sensor, $41 at AutoZone, if you buy 4 of them. So that's $160-something for a 4-pack, $41 a piece. So here's what happens. You have to remove the wheel from the car to put this thing on. Then you have to dismount the tire from the wheel. Then you have to install this new tire pressure sensor. Then you have to reinstall the tire. Then you have to rebalance the wheel and tire assembly. Then you have to reinstall the wheel and tire on the car. Then you have to program the new tire pressure sensor. Now, so that's why it's $150. Now, what would it cost if you just replaced that with a new tire valve stem, the rubber kind, the kind that we used to use in the good old days, like, I don't know, 20 years ago? Well, I can tell you what they cost us, 25 cents a piece. Those black rubber valve stems that they charge between $1 and $2 or $3 a piece for, they cost us 25 cents a piece. I'm not making that up. So what we're looking at is enormous labor cost, enormous complexity, and the average guy can't handle it. And they think they need this stupid thing, and they don't. Just put a piece of tape over that light. That's the easy way on your dashboard that says, your tires, pressure's low. If it's just a faulty sensor. But check your tires for Pete's sake. Buy a good quality tire pressure, gauge. Buy one. Find a good one with name brand. Name brand like, Milton, Milton. That's a good one. Rich, back to you.
Well, thank you, Vince. There's a real reason we talk about personal experiences on here because, in a lot of cases we do talk about financial, economic, social, and political data. We do talk about political correctness. We do talk about outside-the-box ideas and doing things differently. A personal experience, when we read a lot of these articles and that aren't published in the mainstream media, that are published in the alternative or the new media, we dovetail them with personal experiences because the mainstream media, basically, they'll take everything and they'll make it second-hand, third-hand, fourth-hand information, rumors, gossip, hearsay. There's no credibility to that. And that's why we got basically the fake, made-up, set-up, everything phony, Russiagate, Ukrainegate, P dossier, Stormy Daniels, General Flynn, the Mueller trial, Obamagate/Spygate. I mean, we have this is why we talk personal experiences on certain things, because there's no legitimacy if we just do what the mainstream media does, which is rumor, gossip, hearsay, and secondhand information. Now, that being said, I'd like to go, Vince. Time is just going quick into some articles. News in the flash, as you would call it, if I may, please.
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to sit back and enjoy.
And what we can do, if there's an article here, as usual, Vince, that, as you would say, gets you frosted, please comment on that, because I know this audience probably knows about some of these articles. I know this audience knows that we do our reading and research, and this audience is well read and researched. However, sometimes there are articles that are just beyond Twilight Zone. It's hard to believe that America has dropped this far. So I'm going to start with something I mentioned a little less general, and that is, what a surprise is a mass exodus out of New York City. Well, folks, there's a mass exodus out of pretty much every blue Democrat city or state right now. Mass. And there's no choice. Either you're going to be a follower controlled by technology. You're not going to have free markets of supply and demand. Work will continue to be delegitimized in these cities. We're going to have more tools like social distancing and masks to basically eliminate freedoms, liberties, rule of law, make you submissive, break your will. Masks right now are used as anonymity for destruction and violence, and I know this audience is aware of that. Food shortages, lack of free speech, more depopulation, more forced vaccines, more lower immune systems, more immunity passports, more 5G powers destroying our immunity, more domestic violence, depression, division, chaos, infighting. Voting will have no legitimacy in blue cities. It will be 100% rigged. I can guarantee that. But people aren't just leaving out of the New Yorks. They're also leaving out of the Michigans, the Minnesotas, the Illinois, the Washingtons, the Oregons, the California. Heck, I read an article. And the articles I refer to, folks, are articles since I've been on the air last. and the longest period of time is just 1 week, okay? Just 1 week. And I go through them quick because I want to make sure that people get the context, get the information, and I know half of it is hard to believe here in America, but these are actually legitimate published articles in the public domain. Now, I read an article that to rent a U-Haul out of Illinois takes a minimum of 3 weeks. I want you to wrap your head around that. That's how many people are leaving the state of Illinois. And I don't blame them. Next article. African American History Museum. Okay. Here's another Twilight Zone episode. I know some may not believe me, but this African American History Museum is calling individualism, science, hard work, whiteness. And I've given many articles over the past where they've also said math is white supremacy. See, this is what the powers that be are doing. They're giving the narrative to certain institutions, and they're saying, well, if you want your salary, if you want to stay afloat, if you want to stay in business, you better publish and preach this narrative. And what it does, it eliminates all ideas and solutions, especially outside the box thinking and living, to these poor people. Basically, it's eliminating the control of their own destiny. These are all divide and conquer strategies. It's basically a job to manufacture perception, pity, guilt, and ideology. It's meant to sway public opinion and hold on to the narratives and the talking points and the microphone in order to divide the people. And this is why I always say when you stand for principle, 3 criteria, the same rules, laws, accountability, truth, and if someone has less consequences for their behavior, you get to do it too. These are nothing but group identity politics. This is professional wordsmithing. This is media propaganda. This is subliminal messaging. This is meant to insult the work ethic, ability, and intelligence of all those people. This is meant to degrade and disrespect these people. You never, ever empower a people, a person, or a nation by lowering the bars of standards and expectations for a job. This is meant to make people submissive. It's meant to break their will. It's meant to demoralize them. It's meant to reward mediocrity, which eliminates opportunity, knowledge, and productivity and innovation for the little people. That's what's happening here. You know, when we talk about this war in information, which a lot of us, we hear this all over actually not just the old media, but the new media. People talk about it. Information should have an asterisk and quotes around it, because it's basically, excuse me, it's objective facts, rule of law, logic, common sense, versus propaganda, hoaxes, false flags, lies, gaslighting for control of the narratives, to influence fear, to create the strategy of distracting, dumbing down, and dividing the American people by whatever groups you want. It's another form of race baiting, sex baiting, religion baiting. This is what is actually happening in America today. So we are actually allowing the powers that be to provide open roads for anarchy, eliminating full potential of the abilities and opportunities for all the masses, designed by groups. It's elite causing chaos and infighting in order to control everything from the people, including currency, including natural resources, and again, information. And we have to be aware of what the bottom line is. We have to see the trees through the forest. We have to play chess. And remember, I've mentioned this many times, we all have, to be the best chess player or pool player, like a pool table. The best players think 3, 4, 5, 6 moves ahead. And we are not doing that. Is there a major wake-up for the people? Absolutely. But we also have to stop being the silent majority, start resisting these divide and conquer strategies, and see how the powers that be are poisoning us against ourselves. It's just like, these big banks that in Wall Street that get bailed out. They have their own hedging plan. They create make-believe, they call it legitimate, but again, it's in quotes, derivative packages, and they bail out the big people like the Warren Buffetts, but the little people are suffering. Next article. Lawsuit. Teen boy forced to take estrogen shots after diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder. I personally think that what's going to happen, and I don't have a crystal ball, I'm not making a prediction, okay? I'll put it the way I often do. I will not be surprised if all these people who have been forced to take estrogen mimickers, from the plastics to our food to our water to all the poison in our municipal water, if there's not going to be a major lawsuit for all these men being emasculated, it would not surprise me one bit, because it is science. This is why the powers that be want to get rid of science, okay, and call it whiteness. It's all an excuse, because science and math and common sense and logic, these are all the things that make America better and gives us an opportunity to control our own destiny. This is why we talk about on this show about getting back to basics: food, water, shelter, energy, and we've talked in great specificity and detail about all that. Next article, U.S. government uncovers massive nationwide trafficking ring run by the Chinese to arm BLM terrorists with powerful weapons of war. Did you hear that? Do you still want to infight between us Americans? We need to be Americans right now more than ever. Let me read that article again. I'm not trying to scare the people. I'm trying to wake the people up. U.S. government uncovers massive nationwide weapons trafficking ring run by the Chinese to arm Black Lives Matter terrorists with powerful weapons of war. Folks, this is very, very dangerous. Now I'm going to leave you with one last article before the break here. Man stole $9 million in virus bailout and went gambling in Vegas.
Rich Scheben's with his class. He's in Montana. I'm in Missouri. And I've been mentioning that I expect a food shortage across the United States for sure. At least that's my opinion. Based on the heat dome, based on the lack of moisture, and so forth. And it's really difficult on the animals. It's really difficult. When I talk about animals, I'm talking about livestock. It's difficult for them to find water through streams right now. For those of us who have ponds and streams, the streams are dried up. The creeks are dried up. The ground is turned to dust. The grasses are brown. And, for those growing other crops that need moisture to grow, and they all do, it's tough. So I'm really expecting food shortages this year. I really am. And that's in addition to the corona panic and the coronavirus, the COVID-19. McDonald's, the world's largest restaurant chain, has a policy of allocation for beef and pork shipments to the restaurants because of the shortage. They're not doing it. They're not saying, well, you can't have what you're asking for because we don't feel like giving it to you. They want to sell, corporate McDonald's wants to sell as much as they can to their franchises. Well, franchisors and franchisees. Well, the problem is the meat packers are infected. So the supply's down. And that's just one example. Just one example. So if McDonald's is having trouble obtaining pork and beef, sausage, hamburger patties, so is everybody else. That means we are. So keep that in mind as you plan going forward. If you have a freezer, advised you to get one a long time ago when you could get one for $75. Now they're like 5 to 7 times as much for a used one as they were. As a matter of fact, freezers, there was a glut of freezers probably about a year ago. You could get them for free. People were giving them away. They just want to get rid of them. Working freezers. You know, free to a good home. Now, that same freezer's $750, $500 used. So, you might want to pay attention to the signs that are all around us, that there will be more food shortages, more allocations. And the supply chain knows how to do it. They know how to allocate now. You just try to buy, just go to your favorite store and they may say limit 2. If they have it. Whatever it might be. Rich?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why people are gardening a lot more. And during the break, I checked my phone to make sure my mute button was on. It was, thank God, because I was laughing so hard looking out on my porch. I have guinea hens out there, baby guinea hens, and a couple of new kittens rolling around wrestling, and it's just a show. Every day around here is just a comedy show, whether it be goats, baby goats, dogs. Right now I got my Great Pyrenees guard dogs barking at something out there. I mean, you never know what we can have. I mean, sometimes you look out the window, you see a grizzly or a black bear or a mountain lion or a fox or a coyote. It really is a show, and I really recommend people, and they are, which we've discussed in great detail, we have a massive wake-up, and people are getting back to the land. People are starting to think outside the box because they can see that the powers that be want to divide us and want depopulation. They want food shortages. They want skill sets to be eliminated for basic necessities and needs. And here is, when I talked about that last article, I'm going to move on to more articles here. Man stole $9 million in virus bailout and went gambling in Vegas. This actually happened. I read the article. I read most of these articles, if not all of them. This is a true story. And I'm going to go to some articles right now on economics. And then since Vince talked about the COVID-19, I want to discuss some articles on that as well. Next article, photos. Security for Minneapolis council members who called to defund the police, hired security, and spent $152,000. So a lot of these people in these blue Democrat states are so hypocritical, so double standard, so entitled with their eliteness because they're in some council. They are literally asking to defund the police, but they're hiring personal security with your taxpayer dollars. This is an outrage, and this is why people need to start sticking up, because people are losing ground. I've talked many, many years how the bankruptcies, delinquencies, and defaults are going in the wrong direction for the little guy. Here's an article right here. 3.4% of mortgages are delinquent. Now, the peak of 2008, the Great Recession, was 2%. Now we're at 4.4%. Free cash flow is in free fall. The macro environment is severely impaired, and I will get back to these articles after the break.
Yeah, it's about 20 seconds away.
Okay.
We're looking at the country falling down. We're not coming back from this, class. We're not. It's up to you to protect yourselves. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. I have a thought, class. So when that politician comes up to you, or when you happen to bump into him, and he says to you, I need your vote so I can fight for you. And he asks you for money and for your vote so he can fight for you. I suggest you ask that politician the following question. What have you done to protect the environment? I'm going to repeat that. I want you to listen very carefully. What have you done to protect the environment? That's the question. And I'm pretty sure you'll hear something like, well, we've enacted legislation to, and you say, no, you aren't listening to what I said. I said, what have you done to protect the environment? What have you done to protect the environment? Did you stop burning your lights all night long? Did you not set your air conditioner on maximum cold? Did you not set your heating system on maximum warm? Did you stop flying and taking vacations? Did your family stop flying? Did you stop going on junkets? Have you planted any trees? Have you used public transportation? Did you stop using Roundup on your land? Did you stop eating at restaurants, takeout restaurants? Did you turn your computers off when you're not using them? What have you done other than enact laws to tell us what to do? Rich Scheben?
Well, yeah. How many times have you heard me talk about practice what you preach laws? This is why.
Well, not more than a couple times per broadcast.
Absolutely. This is why we need to have things like this, because we cannot allow, we're seeing the consequences of the inaction of decades of political correctness. Okay? We can't have a separate set of rules, laws, and accountability that's based on what group you're in. One for the aristocracy, one for the serfs, one for the Democrats, one for the Republicans, which basically don't get any concessions. Then they separate us for the purpose of divide and conquer strategies. One for your shade of skin pigmentation, one for your gender, one for the gender you identify as, one for your sexual orientation, different ones for your religion, and on and on and on. They're playing us like a violin. And we have to stand up to the fact that we are being used, we're being played, we're being conned. And I know a lot of people don't want to admit that they're being duped, but that's what happens. When you lower the bars of standards and expectations for getting a job, and you throw in central bank corrupt monetary policy and Keynesian economics, which we've talked hours on the air about all this stuff, going into our present demographic situation, and you throw in group identity politics, then you're basically feathering the nest of money printing and subsidies and special interest groups and lobbying and PACs to certain people and certain corporations, which are just as much to blame as the government. And then they're throwing robotics, automation, artificial intelligence at us to take our jobs, and we're still fighting against each other based on what gender or skin pigmentation, shade, or sexual orientation or religion. We're not going to gain any headway. These are unsustainable headwinds if we don't have synergy, if we don't have unity. Vince, I'm going to go back to these articles because we're running out of time, and I'm obviously not going to get to all of them. But here's an example right here. Munchin suggests U.S. should forgive small PPP loans of $150,000 or less. Now, you've heard me say that I'm not for welfare and food stamps. Okay, if you put into the kitty, then you can get out of the kitty. But you got to remember, these people who are getting welfare and food stamps, again, I'm not a proponent of it because it basically destroys people's lives when you're on government beer money. You'll never have anything. You'll never go anywhere. You'll never have the experiences that you feel you deserve. You'll never have the adventures that you want to live or the challenges that you want to have in your life, okay? But I'm telling you right now, the super wealthy, and I've given many a lecture about the welfare for the rich. I've talked about the money printing out of thin air. I've talked about fractional reserve lending, which is now, you don't even need money in the bank. I've talked about stock buybacks. I've talked about all this money shuffling and creative accounting for non-productive, non-earning purposes. That all goes to the super wealthy. This is what's happening. See, as long as we fight against each other, this is what keeps happening. And they're going to use more gaslighting, more lies, more propaganda. Here's an article right here. American people suffering and billionaires are getting richer. Yeah, nothing to see here. Move along. That is the title of the article. How many, for those of you who are regular listeners, for years, I've been sharing with you how we can't lower the bars of standards and expectations for a job. Because when you eliminate hard work, proven results, and qualifications, you're doubting your own value, you're creating an economic black hole, and you're not giving the little people an opportunity to control their destiny. And then the same people who are demanding, because of the entitlements, to file the victim group status card and to demand to lower the bars of standards and expectations for a job. You're demanding no protection, rights, and restitution under the rule of law for the people who were targeted and affected. And you're giving basically a no check on runaway power. And the worst thing that happens out of this, while you're still sitting there thinking about, oh my God, he's insulting my group. Oh my God, he must be a racist, bigot, sexist, misogynist, homophobe, conspiracy theorist, an intolerant, violent hater. He must be an anti in front of some word or an ism, and phobia on the back of every word. Well, no. What you're doing is you're enabling, you're protecting the most corrupt companies in the country with liability immunity. You're not just destroying capitalism and enforcing fraud. You're giving wealth equality and enhancing an illegitimate fascist system. When you keep sticking up for your group, your hyphen, and your pronoun, we have to be Americans, or else we're going to continue to give free lunch to the elite. And wealth redistribution is going to go from the bottom 93% to the top 1%, and the precedents are going to continue to divide and conquer and lower the bars of standards to the American people. Basically, people are going to be sold out to the highest bidder. Doesn't matter if legitimacy or the rule of law is there. It doesn't matter. We are literally eliminating the rule of law. We're allowing the elite to manufacture their own perception of their self-importance and giving them self-preservation at the same time. This is why on this show we call out hypocrisy and double standards and brainwashing, because we're being used. And they're biologically, chemically, technologically, psychologically poisoning us against ourselves. Next article. Illegal immigration drain on U.S. hospitals spikes in recent months. Well, yeah, because just like I've talked about when I've talked about inflation, I've used an inflation chart for those of you who've been listening for years. I've talked about car insurance, about health care, about education. When you give away to illegal immigrants, people who don't put into the kitty, we are going to pay for it through cost shifting. Okay, next article. New York Times is wrong 9 times about the same anti-Trump story. The same story. People, you cannot listen to the mainstream media. They are all propaganda, lies, false flags, gaslighting. Everything is inaccurate for the narrative. That's all it is. Next article. The family that owns the New York Times were slaveholders. Are you going to see this on the mainstream media? We can talk about this for hours, but I have too much information. Next article. Pelosi said Trump is leaving the White House whether he knows it yet or not. Can you see the totalitarian, tyrannical threats that are happening from the left? You know, the left, all this pedophile information that's not coming out. People who are addicted to chasing stimuli, people who have everything. This is why I talk about laws of excess, because these people are funding all the lawlessness and official stories and narratives. Next article. Twitter is so busted. Screenshots leak showing massive censorship operation. Next article. Twitter has fallout. Jack Dorsey busted on blacklisting. Lied to Congress. Folks, if we did 1/1,000,000th of what these gazillionaires are doing, of what these corporations are doing, we would be in jail for the rest of our lives. And they just get their hands slapped. And all we hear is talking. And we don't see people being arrested. We don't see any of these indictments We don't see people going to jail for the rest of their lives. Next article, Senate transcripts. Joe Biden quoted the N-word, N as in nature, but that's not the word. Joe Biden quoted the N-word 13 times in 1985 hearings. But that's okay. Next article, Nadler proposes ban on deporting illegal aliens with coronavirus. You really think the Democrats are out to help the people? Do you think they care about minorities? They don't care what your skin pigmentation is, what your gender is. They care about covering up the crimes that they have done. They care about power, money, and control. It's an addiction. Now, Vince, you mentioned the coronavirus, so I'm going to mention a few articles on that as quick as possible here. I know we're going to a break in seconds, but I'm going to mention a few and I'll finish up on the backside. Bahamas bans American tourists as Florida becomes epicenter of pandemic. Really? Do you think it's because the RNC convention's there? Just saying. Next article, Florida hospital overstated COVID cases 10 times. 10 times. Next article, face masks mandated by U.S. government specifically say they don't protect against COVID-19. Next article, dear humans, face masks don't work. The study review was published by your very own CDC, Centers for Disease Control. And that last commercial we had before the last break about President Trump wearing a mask regarding patriotism. Well, obviously the information is not getting to the top because President Trump is surrounded by traitors and hoaxers and cowards. It's up to the alternative media to get the information out, folks. And I'll be back with some more information about the CDC. Follow the money. That's what's going to be. Dollar signs for this next proven result here. We'll be right back. Thank you.
Rich Scheben's with us. Rich, please continue.
Well, thank you, Vince. And as always, thank you for allowing me to exercise my First Amendment right. Now, folks, I mentioned right before the break, sometimes when the music comes on, I don't know what you guys can hear, but when the UK government specifically says they don't protect, meaning face masks, against COVID-19, and the CDC published their own data that face masks don't work, how can we not think this is made to make us submissive, made to break our will, made to create anonymity for crime and looting and destruction and violence? Now, I want you to follow the money here in this next article. CDC employees, and by the way, I think this audience knows that you're not going to get these articles, this information, these published articles in the public domain from the mainstream media. It will not happen. CDC employees made more than 8,000 federal contributions to PACs and politicians since 2015. Only 5 went to the Republican Party. Let me repeat that. CDC employees made more than 8,000 federal contributions to PACs and politicians since 2015. This is CDC, okay? That went to the left. That went to Democrats. Only 5 went to the Republicans. Now, I'm just saying, when you start seeing government employees that you're paying an extraordinarily salary to, much higher than the private sector, not just in salary, but in benefits and in pensions and in job protection, and you see them buying their job to enforce the narrative for their own self-preservation, this should really anger you. Next article, proof they are counting any death as COVID death. We've been saying this for months. Again, the disclaimer, it's a shame I got to keep using this disclaimer, but we believe this is a legitimate pandemic, okay, in the context that this is a virus. We have proven that this has been man-made, geoengineered bioweapon, okay? Whether it got loose out of a Wuhan lab is yet to be determined, but there's a lot of question marks when you see Obama literally funding a lab like this with millions of dollars, and then you see the Faucis of the world and big pharmas of the world already setting the table to make tons of money with the vaccine. Now, the CDC has been caught mixing antibody and viral tests together in their data. This was out of Georgia and Texas and Virginia and a few other states. So when you're rigging the numbers with words like probabilities, and then you have this guy Fauci where he's changed his mind on protocol, and they're blaming Trump. He changed his mind, Fauci, 8 times. What are we supposed to think? Next article, failed motorcycle crash listed as COVID-19 death in Florida, says state official. I believe they turned that over, just this one death, because so many people were talking about it. This is not an illegitimate system of government. This is an unsustainable, bought and paid for, narrative holding government that we have. Next article, Planned Parenthood bailout. You know, the Planned Parenthood that received $7 million from COVID loans connected to fetal organ harvesting, that Planned Parenthood. That should be like a sobriety test, saying that 10 times fast. Okay, next article, Stockman. The clown cars are fully loaded, and Dr. Fauci is leading the parade. And he's going to be rewarded for his legitimacy, and I'm using quotes there, by throwing in the first pitch at the Washington Sentinel game. See how they do this, folks? If you don't follow the narrative, you get demonized, discredited, delegitimized. If you do and are willing to be bought and paid for the agenda, to hold the narrative, you get rewarded. You're a hero. Next article. F this. Alyssa Milano demands national shutdown now. You think the food shortages and starvation is bad now? You think small businesses are losing ground now? You think bankruptcies and delinquencies and defaults are bad now? Woo! Let's let Alyssa Milano shut down the nation. You bet. That'll work. We'll be back after this break.
Class, it looks like this Thursday I'll be spending 2 hours with you talking about tips from my book. It's unfinished, unpublished, and it's not available for sale. But one of the things I'm going to talk about is refrigeration. And I'm going to talk about the fleecing, the absolute fleecing that Americans are getting with their home air conditioning systems and their auto air conditioning systems and the new car refrigeration systems. I'll be talking about that on Thursday. And I'm going to teach you how you can protect yourself from it and how you can probably do some of this refrigeration work yourselves. Back to you, Rich Scheben.
Well, thank you, Vince. You mentioned the word fleecing, so I'm going to go to a different article that I wasn't going to mention. But, we try to give a balance here. We try and talk about the truth. But a lot of this COVID money has gone to certain conservative people as well. So I'm going to mention these two just to give a balance. Because when you have people literally starving and they can't get ahead, they have no savings, they can't get a good job because now you get a job based on what group you're in lieu of hard work, effort, proven results, and qualifications, because hard work is now whiteness, as I mentioned earlier in the show, and this was a quote from some left-wing radical. But there's some conservative personalities, and I am on Michael Savage's website right now. I'm michaelsavage.com if you want to look at that. And I'm going to mention a few conservative personalities, too, that got a lot of money. $350,000, $1 million went to this is Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College. $1 million went to his Claremont Institution for the Study of Statesmanship and Political Philosophy. Oh, $350,000 to $1 million. Pardon me. Glenn Beck, $150,000 to $350,000 went to his Mercury One charitable foundation. Brent Boswell, longtime conservative figure, $1 to $2 million went to his Media Research Center. Dennis Prager, president of Prager Prager University. $350K to $1 million went to Prager University Foundation. 150 to 135,000 went to Americans for Tax Reform. 350,000 to 1 million went to the Center for New American Security. Michael Florney and Kurt Campbell, Obama-era defense appointees. Ayn Rand Institute, Citizens for Government Waste. I mean, there's a lot of stuff here that, basically, you hear me say this often, folks, when I talk about the left-right paradigm. I mention how it's very little left-right paradigm and a lot more aristocracy managing and controlling the serfs, whether it be the Federal Reserve, the central banks, all the money, all the corruption, all the money shuffling and creative accounting and non-earnings basically is going from the little people to the wealthy. And we are paying for everything through taxation or inflation, okay? We are funding these people. And if we eliminate synergy and unity, because they are literally playing the people of group against group, and if we continue to demand this entitlement of victim group status or protectionist group status and demand to lower the bars of standards and expectations for a group, if hard work, proven results, qualifications mean nothing, you will never dig out of your hole. And when you're demanding in a country that has more attorneys, more lawyers than the whole world put together, no protection, no rights, no restitution under the rule of law for the people who are affected and targeted, forget about it. There's no hope for anybody, no little people, because you're enabling and protecting the most corrupt companies in the world, in the country, with liability immunity. You are literally handing the playbook, the template of wealth inequality to the big corporations. So if you keep protecting and sticking up for your group, hyphen, and pronoun, you can't be more un-American, and history will show that the free lunches have been given by you to the elite. Here's an article right here. Federal law enforcement made an arrest of an Antifa black bloc militant. The camera person was saying, "Don't worry, the NLG will get you out." This is the National Lawyers Guild, an organization historically close to American communists, and they operate as a left legal wing of Antifa. Folks, we need to start sticking together because we're not going to get any truth. We have more attorneys in this country than the whole world combined, and I couldn't even sue because I was told I didn't have enough group self-pity points. Is that how you want to go down, America? I have an article here, and I want to comment by Vincent Finelli on this. Thousands of doctors and scientists, and we've mentioned many of these articles over the past few months, have come out against the Faucis and the lockdowns, including a Nobel Prize-winning biophysicist. And the fake news doesn't want you to have this information. We have seen videos. We've mentioned articles about all these physicians, all these scientists that have come out against the protocol, the agenda. But see, those people get labeled as charlatans or some other derogatory, delegitimizing, discrediting term. Vince, my question to you is specifically, when we see this agenda-driven pandemic to basically keep the people from even surviving, eliminating the Constitution, creating domestic violence and depression and division and chaos and infighting, especially in these blue Democrat cities. They want to eliminate the legitimacy of voting and rig it by doing mail-in voting. We see the Democrats literally controlled and becoming allies with the technology of big tech in China. along with the UN and the World Health Organization and the Soros and the Gates and the Hollywood people. When you have thousands of scientists and doctors who are willing to stand up and not be willing to be bought and paid for to tell the truth, but they're getting maybe 2% of the microphone and airtime versus the 98% who have sold out the people and do not stand for principle. How do the people, with where America has gone, not where it's going, already gone, how do the American people, especially the bottom 93% who don't have the resources to ferret out the truth or the money to pay for real doctors, real hospitals, when they've seen doctors and hospitals literally shove vents down people's mouths and kill them? When they've seen people, doctors and hospitals take this $53,000 to diagnose them as a COVID patient. When they see big pharmas and the CDC and these so-called bought and paid for scientists saying, "Oh, forget about hydroxychloroquine, it's too inexpensive," even though they've used the Lancet and other articles to basically change and edit and fake the outcomes for this other pharmaceutical drug, which costs $3,000 per patient. So when the people see this misdiagnosis, the fear and control propaganda, and they see scientists and doctors then literally putting their hand out and saying, "Okay, put that money in there and I will follow your agenda." What do people in the future, what do the little people, the bottom 93% believe? Do you go to a doctor anymore? Do you go to a hospital? Are they going to be diagnosed with something for the agenda? Are they going to be diagnosed with something so they can be a guinea pig for big pharma? Or maybe have to buy a certain prescription that has been bought and paid for and sold? Vince, what do the people believe? Where do they go? How do you know who's on the good team and who's on the bad team? Who do you know who's been sold to the highest bidder? What do people think? Where do they go, Vince? I'm asking you.
Well, I can tell you a couple things. One, that the Treasury Secretary, as you said, is suggesting that all the PPP loans, $150,000 and below loans, be forgiven. That means it was a loan, but we'll make it a gift. That's outrageous. Absolutely outrageous. Number two, the government has told businesses to shut down. You will not operate. And yet they're expected to pay taxes. That's outrageous. Next thing, the people can't get a doctor's appointment because doctors aren't in their offices. I mean, Dr. Shealy is, but typically if you break your arm, you break your leg, and you have a heart attack, it's going to be really difficult to get you seen. Why is that? So the medical profession is in disarray. The dental profession is in disarray. Just try getting a dental appointment. And yet money is being given away freely. The news, as you've mentioned, is reporting disinformation, a small amount of accurate information. People who are paying attention and reading and listening and so forth find it very difficult to understand what the truth is. The president has just decided that he is going to lead by example for the first time in a long time and wear a mask, which is required in many states. The president decided not to lock down the airlines coming from China initially. I'm talking January. And then he decided to lock them down late. And then he pats himself on the back and tells everybody what a great job we're doing. In those days, we had 15 people infected. Now we have millions infected in the United States. We have, the deaths are astronomical. And yet we're told that these are deaths from COVID 19. We're told that they're fake. We're told that they're embellished. We're also told they're underreported. It's very, very difficult to know what to believe. But I can tell you this, that if the people actually paid attention to what is really happening, I'm talking about the misinformation, the disinformation, the lies, the Ghislaine Maxwell paying to discredit people, paying fees to discredit people, literally, tarnish their reputations, good people's reputations, as a member of Mossad. She's part of that. If you look at all this, you have to scratch yourself on the head and say, will there be a revolution by tomorrow morning? And I'm not talking about, we already are in a revolution and a second American Civil War combined. But I'm talking about absolute, widespread, full-blown, no-holds-barred revolution, Civil War. Would that be occurring by morning if people actually knew what was going on? Rich Scheben's with us. So, according to Daily Mail, they have an exclusive. Ghislaine Maxwell paid $25,000 to fake news purveyor Jacob Wohl, W-O-H-L, to smear Epstein victims, Jeffrey Epstein victims, and get prosecutor Jeffrey Berman fired in an attempt to stall sex trafficking investigation against her. And there are reports allegedly linking Ghislaine Maxwell to Mossad. So Ghislaine Maxwell is the gal who allegedly provided victims for use as sexual toys by the wealthy in the elite of the world. And so in order to extricate herself from some of this, she hired a guy by the name of Jacob, J-A-C-O-B, Wohl, W-O-H-L, to smear Jeffrey Epstein victims. So not only are they victims, they get beat up in the media. Ghislaine Maxwell is a pretty dangerous creature. And I think it's great that she is still behind bars awaiting trial. Now, if she doesn't survive this wait, you know that the rich and powerful had their hand in it, right? At least that's the way it appears to me. Can you imagine that? Beating up victims and smearing their reputation because of the illegalities that Ghislaine Maxwell et al. Have committed. And that's why people are protesting. That's why the riots will continue. Because people have had it. They realize what Rich Scheben has been talking about. There's a double standard. There's laws for us, and then those laws for us don't apply to the elite. They do whatever they want. And if you wonder why is it that Hollywood has such a reputation for they can't stay married in Hollywood. Well, I believe they hire weak people. And they control them because of their weaknesses. What would that be? Sex addiction, drug addiction, substance abuse, etc. You know, the only guy that I have read about that hasn't been involved in a scandal that I like as an actor is a guy by the name of James Bumgarner, B-U-M-G-A-R-N-E-R. His Hollywood name is James Garner. He's Maverick in the TV series of the 1950s, early 60s. He's also James Rockford of the Rockford Files. No scandals. How's that possible? And what were his series about? They were always about some illegality, somebody taking advantage of a nice person, and he would come to the rescue. The good guys would win, the bad guys would lose, and that's the way it was back in the 1950s with James Garner, and in the 80s with the Rockford Files. But that's not the way it is today. No. Now Hollywood teaches people rape, murder, mayhem, gore, guts, profanity. It's like it's as if it were normal. It's not normal. They're trying to make it normal. It's disgusting. And that's what I said about USA Prepares about a week ago, that I will not tolerate the use of profanity on USA Prepares. I won't do it. I don't have to do it. And anyone who uses profanity to make their point is weakening their argument, at least in my world. Rich Scheben?
You know, it's funny, I'm looking at this article, the same article is on Zero Hedge right now. And, you know, they use things like alleged. They use things like underage girls. That's a term you see a lot coming out, especially the mainstream media, when they even discuss it. And basically what it really means is it shouldn't be alleged, okay, because everybody knows this. And it shouldn't be words like underage girls. It's like saying half-truths or I misspoke. Basically, it should mean children, okay? Because they're wordsmithing. They're trying to, but what this was, it was sex trafficking minors, but this was basically a blacklist scandal to control the narrative, to say, okay, you got money, you got influence, you got fame, you're going to do what we tell you to do so we can control the public. And that's basically what it boils down to.
Rich, let me see if I've got this right. So we get a guy who is a captain of industry, maybe a high-ranking government type, maybe like a president, and we shuttle him off on, or they shuttle him off on an airplane to an island. They videotape these guys having sex with these children, and then they say, oh, by the way, how do you plan on voting on this particular thing? Here's how we'd like you to vote. Blackmail at the highest level, at the international level, bringing the United States to its knees. Thank you, Rich Scheben.